Today we're moving on from something that's not check and it's not checkmate. Something called a stalemate, which is, in simpler terms, it's considered a draw. So what is a stalemate or a draw? Well, a stalemate or a draw is when the king is not in check, but he cannot move to the squares around him. Let's take a look at our first example. So, as I said, the king cannot be in check. So we can see in our first example, the king, it's black to move in this position. But can a black move in this position? Well, let's recall from our lesson about the queen. The queen can move it can move diagonally, it can move vertically, and it can move horizontally. So it can move to all these squares. That's a lot of squares, 27 squares. And she's pretty occupied. But we have to focus on these three squares. She occupies all those three squares. But the big problem is our king needs to move there. But we can never in chess, never, ever can we walk into check. So that's our big problem here. We cannot move into check. So therefore, this is a draw. And each player, when it's a draw, each player it's like a half. So he cannot. So what I can describe it as, the king cannot move, so it's a draw. And sometimes players, especially in in-person games, they they want to draw. Never accept them, honestly, in my career, because I feel like if you accept a draw when it's not a draw, especially in this position, let's say the queen blunders, the queen is to c6, and he accidentally blunders to b6. He's on c5 and he blunders to b6. It's quite a position that I'm familiar with. I've seen this position before, the blunder, and actually positions like this, it's a draw. So we shake hands, especially in person chess. We shake hands, and it's a tie. So a draw is also considered a tie. So when this is a tie, the king can never move. So this is a tie in this position. And that's just why you never ever in chess, especially when you're in an endgame with the queen. So we have the queen, and this is a check, right? The black king moves. We want to trap him to one side. This is actually a famous variation of the kings and queen helper checkmate. So this is a checkmate. Although in this position, when we're in this position, the black king can never move to any of these squares. So that is our first example. Let's take a look at another example. This looks very similar, right? The king is very far away. But let me tell you, this is white to move. So when it's white to move, it's not black to move, right? If it was black to move, white would actually be in a draw or a tie. However, you can see this is not a draw, because in order for this, we need to move our queen. So how do you get out of a tie or a draw? Well, quite simply, we give the king more space to run to. So remember, we want to give him more space, but the big thing is we have to consider, in this position, we don't want to play queen somewhere to, like queen to the square e6, because then that king has too much space. So back in our original position, a better move would actually to be queen to the square b5. Now, in this position, he only has one square to move to. See, in this position, the king to the squares around him, he can move to the square a7. That is not a stalemate or draw or tie. Therefore, he can move to the square a7. And I said this is another famous checkmate. This is the queen and helper checkmate with the king. So that is our second position. Let's take a look at two more quick examples. So this is not a checkmate, but it's quite famous. So this one, in this position, it is white to move. So this is an advanced tactic. It's called a pin. So this rook, can he move? Well, he actually can't. It's called a pin because he's pinned, because you see that the black king is behind, right? So he cannot move because that rook, remember, he moves on vertically and horizontally lines. So when he moves in there, he can never move, or else the black king will be in check. So it's white to move in this position. And one of the biggest mistakes I've seen in this position is to take. We are gonna take that rook. So as we can see in this position, that is why check was so important, the lesson check. So make sure to check out the check lesson that I posted before you work on to check and checkmate, check and stalemate. So this one, so black takes the rook. And now what do we do in this position? Remember, we have CPR. We have capture, protect, or run away. So can we capture? Oh yeah, we can. We can capture in this position. But remember, if we capture in this position, that's why that position was so obviously funny. You can see here that now we have two kings. But this is a special position. It's very, very special position. This is when we have two kings but no other pieces, it's officially a draw or a tie. Because the king can move here and we're just copying moves. So that is another variation of a stalemate or a tie. Let's take a look at one final position. So this one is quite similar to our last position, although I have added an idea. I have those magic powers. So it's black to move in this. It's actually white to move in this position, actually. It would make more sense. So if it's white to move in this position, we see that there's one quite simple way to win this game. Knight check or knight check, right? Knight e6 check or knight g6 check. But remember, a knight and a king in chess can never, or knight and a bishop, knight or bishop. If you have a rook, you can checkmate. If you have a knight, you can never checkmate. If you have a bishop, you can never checkmate. If you have a queen, remember I showed you in the first position, it can checkmate. It can checkmate. Although in this position, remember that knight check doesn't do anything. You're just gonna chase that king out of its protection. So this is officially a draw. Because no matter what you do, there's no way to win this game. There's no checkmate. So if I give you some analysis, so the knight here, and then king here, because we want to keep this king trapped, there's no way to win this game. You cannot go here. So if the king goes here, that king can go back, and we're not making any progress, right? It's called what we call free-float repetition. So we repeat the position because there's no other way. I mean, unless in this position, this king, unless he goes, because in this position, if you check, it's check, and he can move here, then what? You can give another check, and then remember the king can never move here, can never move here, can never move here because of that king. So there's no way to checkmate. So that is a draw or a tie, and it's quite important in chess.